welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book The Turkish Slipper, which is part of my novels collection. Single chapter. See there, Bachelor Duarte. He had just finished tying the stiffest, most perfect cravat seen that year of 1850, when someone announced the arrival of Major Lopo Alves. Keep in mind it was nighttime, already past 9 o'clock. Duarte shivered and for good reason. First, the Major could be one of the most boring men alive, no matter the occasion. Second, Duarte had been getting ready to go to a ball and see once more those rare golden curls and thoughtful blue eyes, the kind our climate rarely gives us. Their courtship had begun a week earlier. His heart, caught gently between two waltzes, had sent a full declaration through his brown eyes. Those eyes had delivered the message right on time, 10 minutes before supper, and received a happy reply shortly after dessert. 3 days later, the first love letter was on its way. Things were going so well that by year's end, they might very well walk together down the aisle. Under these circumstances, the Major's visit felt like a real disaster. An old family friend and former army comrade of Duarte's late father, the Major deserved every bit of respect. It would be impossible to send him away or treat him coldly. Still, there was one small relief. The Major was related to Cecilia, the girl with the blue eyes. If needed, he could be counted on to support their match. Duarte slipped into a robe and went to the living room, where Major Alves stood waiting. The Major held a rolled-up paper under one arm and looked absent-mindedly into the air, unaware of Duarte's entrance. "What good wind brings you to Catombe at this hour?" asked Duarte, doing his best to sound genuinely pleased. A tone, suggested not only by politeness, but also by self-interest. "I can't say the wind was good or bad," replied the Major with a smile hidden beneath his thick gray mustache. "But I can tell you it blew hard. Are you heading out?" "I'm going to Rio Comprido." "Oh, I figured as much." "You're off to the widow Meneses' house." Lopo Alves glanced at his watch. It was 9:30. He rubbed his mustache, stood up, paced the room for a moment, then sat back down. "I imagine my wife and the children are already there," he said. "I'll join them later if I can." "Isn't it still early?" Duarte, a lawyer, nodded slightly but said nothing. The Major cleared his throat. "Let me tell you something you won't expect," he began. "I've written a play." "A play?" Oh, Duarte repeated, surprised. "Yes," Lopo Alves replied, straightening in his chair. "You may not know this about me, but ever since I was young, I've had this urge to write. Military service didn't cure my, it only slowed things down. The illness returned, stronger than ever. Now, the only way is to give in and let nature take its course." Duarte remembered that, years ago, the Major used to talk about writing speeches, a few tragedies, and many articles on the campaigns of the River Plate. But all that seemed like a distant memory. It had been ages since Lopo Alves last mentioned anything about generals or historical figures. No one could have guessed that his old passion would return, especially in the form of a full drama. Duarte might have understood better if he'd known what had happened weeks earlier. The Major had seen a performance of an ultra-romantic play and it had deeply impressed him. That night planted the idea firmly in his mind, wanted to write something for the stage himself. But Lopo Alves didn't share these details. And so, Duarte remained puzzled by the sudden burst of creative energy from his old friend. He did not question it further, nor did he try to stop it. Instead, he praised the Major's intelligence, warmly expressed how eager he was to see him succeed in this new endeavor, and even promised to speak to some friends who worked at the Correo Mercantil to help spread the word. It wasn't until he saw the Major, trembling with joy, unroll the manuscript he had brought with him that Duarte suddenly stiffened and turned pale. "Thank you for your kind words," said Lopo Alves. "And I truly appreciate your offer to help. But before that, I need something else from you. You're smart and well-read. Please read this and tell me honestly what you think." Duarte didn't want praise. He wanted honesty, brutal honesty. If the Major thought it was bad, he should say so without holding back. Duarte tried to avoid this bitter moment, but asking for mercy was hard and getting it impossible. He glanced sadly at the clock. It was 9:55 ante meridiem. Meanwhile, Major Lopo Alves gently flipped through the 180 pages of the manuscript, like a father looking through his son's schoolwork. "This will go fast," said Lopo Alves. "I know how boys are, and I know how dances work. Don't worry, you'll still have time to dance 2 or 3 waltzes with her, if you have one, or maybe even them." Then he added, "Wouldn't it be better if we went to your study?" For the bachelor, it didn't matter where the punishment would happen. He agreed to the guest's suggestion. Used to the freedom their friendship allowed, the Major told the servant boy not to let anyone in. The executioner didn't need witnesses. The study door closed behind them. Lopo Alves took a seat near the desk, facing the bachelor, who sank into a large leather armchair, burying both his body and his despair into its softness. He had decided not to speak, hoping to get this over with faster. "The play has 7 scenes," said the Major. These words sent a chill down Duarte's spine. There was nothing new on those 180 pages, except the author's handwriting. Everything else, the situations, the characters, the plot devices, even the writing style, came straight from the most exaggerated examples of messy romanticism. Lopo Alves thought he was creating something original, when all he was doing was copying his own memories. In different circumstances, the piece might have made for a fun read. Already in the first scene, which acted like a prologue, there was a child stolen from their family. A poisoning, 2 mysterious figures in cloaks, the tip of a dagger, and plenty of adjectives just as sharp as the blade. In the second scene, one of the cloaked figures died, only to return to life in the third, get arrested in the 5th, and finally kill the tyrant in the 7th. Duarte sat in the dim light of the room, his fingers tapping nervously against the armrest. The second act had just ended, and with it came a storm of emotions. There was more than just the apparent death of the mysterious cloaked man. There was also the kidnapping of a young girl, now grown into a 17-year-old woman, a monologue that felt like it lasted just as long, and the theft of a will. It was nearly 11 o'clock when Lopo Alves finally finished reading. Duarte could barely hide his anger. It was already too late to go to Rio Comprido. If the Major had died right then, Duarte might have seen it as a gift from fate itself. But even so, The bitterness boiling inside him was hard to explain. After all, he wasn't a cruel man by nature. And yet, bad books can twist minds in strange ways. As Lopo read aloud, something strange happened. To the naked eye, all Duarte saw was the thick, dark beard of the old playwright. But in his mind's eye, all he could picture were the golden curls of Cecilia. He imagined her blue eyes, her fair and rosy skin, the graceful way she moved. She stood out among all the other ladies at the widow Menezes' ball, radiant and untouchable. He could almost hear the music, the chatter, the soft rustle of silk gowns brushing together. And all the while, Lopo's dull, flat voice kept going, reading line after line with the confidence of a man who truly believed in his own genius. Time slipped away unnoticed. Duarte lost count of how many scenes had passed. Midnight had come and gone. His chance to see Cecilia that night was gone. Suddenly, he noticed the major rolling up the manuscript again. The old man stood up straight, fixed Duarte with a sharp, angry stare, and without a word, stormed out of the room. Duarte tried to call after him, but shock held him back, his voice caught in his throat, his body frozen. By the time he managed to move, all he could hear was the echo of the playwright's heavy boots on the pavement outside. He rushed to the window, hoping to catch a glimpse, but the street was empty. Both the author and his cursed drama had vanished into the night. For God's sake, Duarte muttered, sighing deeply. Why didn't he leave sooner? Duarte barely had time to sigh, let alone watch the sigh escape through the window on its way to Rio Comprido, when his servant announced a visitor, a short, fat man. At this hour, Duarte exclaimed. At this hour, the short, fat man repeated, stepping into the room. At this or any hour, the police may enter a citizen's home when a serious crime is involved. A crime? I believe you know me. I don't have that honor. I work for the police. But what do I have to do with you? What crime are you talking about? Something small. A theft. You are accused of stealing a Turkish slipper. The man said this with a sarcastic grin, staring at Duarte like a judge sizing up a sinner. Duarte had never even heard of the stolen item. He thought there must be some mistake. Perhaps someone confused him with another man who shared his name. He didn't get angry, not even at the insult of being suspected of such a petty crime. He told the officer exactly that, and added it was no reason to disturb him so late. I ask your pardon, the man replied. This slipper is worth many thousands of reais. It's decorated with fine diamonds, making it extremely valuable. It's Turkish not only in design, but also in origin. The owner, one of our most traveled Brazilian ladies, bought it 3 years ago in Egypt from a Jew. The story the son of Moses told about the piece crafted by Muslim hands is miraculous, and in my opinion, completely false. But telling that tale isn't necessary now. What matters is that the slipper was stolen, and the police received a report naming you. As he spoke, the man walked toward the window. At that moment, Duarte began to suspect he was dealing either with a madman or a thief himself. Duarte didn't have time to think much about his suspicion. A few seconds later, 5 armed men stormed into the room. They grabbed him roughly and dragged him down the stairs, despite his loud screams and desperate attempts to break free. Outside, there was a carriage waiting. They shoved him inside with force. Inside were two other men, one short and fat, the other tall and thin. They sat him in the back of the carriage without a word. The driver cracked his whip, and the horses took off at full speed. "Ah! Ah!" laughed the fat man. "So you thought you could steal Turkish slippers, flirt with blonde girls, maybe even marry one, and then laugh at all of humanity?" When Duarte heard that, he shivered. Was this about the girl he loved? It must be revenge from a jealous rival. Or maybe it had nothing to do with her at all. He couldn't stop thinking, going over every possibility as the carriage raced through the streets. After some time, he tried to speak. "Whatever my mistakes," he said carefully, "I suppose the police—" "We are not the police," interrupted the thin man coldly. "Oh. This gentleman and I make a pair," he continued. "He, you, and I will make a trio." "But trio isn't better than pair. No, it can't be. A couple is perfect. You probably don't understand me." "No, sir." "You will soon enough." Duarte gave up trying to understand. He stayed quiet, leaned back, and let the ride take him wherever it would. About 5 minutes later, the horses stopped. "We're here," said the fat man. He pulled a cloth from his pocket and offered it to Duarte. "Cover your eyes." Duarte refused at first, but the thin man told him calmly that it was smarter to obey than to fight. So Duarte tied the cloth around his eyes, stepped out of the carriage, and followed them into the unknown. Duarte heard a door creak not long after. Two people most, likely the same ones who had ridden with him in the carriage, took his hands and led him through countless hallways and down several staircases. As he walked, Duarte caught bits of unfamiliar voices, scattered words, broken sentences. At last they stopped. Someone told him to sit and take off the blindfold. He obeyed, but when he uncovered his eyes, no one else was there. He found himself in a large room, brightly lit and richly decorated. The furniture spoke of elegance and wealth. There were many ornaments, perhaps too many, but whoever had chosen them clearly had fine taste. The bronze statues, the velvet chairs, the carpets and mirrors, along with countless other items filling the space, all looked expensive and well made. This sight brought some calm back to Duarte's mind. It didn't seem like a place where thieves would live. He leaned lazily back onto an ottoman. The moment he touched it, memories rushed in. That very morning he had sat on Cecilia's ottoman while she teased him about the missing slipper. The stolen slipper. He spent a few minutes thinking it over and realized that the slipper was now more than just a mystery. It was probably gone for good. But as he thought deeper, another idea came to him, clearer and stronger than before. Maybe the slipper was only a metaphor. Perhaps what he had truly stolen was Cecilia's heart, and someone wanted to punish him for it. That must be it, he thought. But who could this rival be? Just then, a door at the far end of the room opened, and the black robe of a pale, bald priest appeared. Duarte jumped up, startled, as if pulled by invisible strings. The priest crossed the room slowly. As he passed, he raised his hand and blessed Duarte. Then he left through another door across the room. Duarte stood frozen, staring at the spot where the priest had disappeared. He saw nothing, heard nothing. Every sense seemed to stop. His mind went blank. Duarte had just begun to process the strangeness of the previous encounter when another unexpected event threw all his thoughts into chaos. He barely had time to consider a new theory when the first door opened again, and this time the thin man walked in. Without a word, the man approached him and gestured for Duarte to follow. Duarte didn't resist. They left through a third door and walked down several dimly lit hallways until they reached a small room, lit only by 2 candles resting on silver candlesticks. The candlesticks sat atop a wide table. At the head of the table sat an older man who looked about 55 years old. He was tall and strong, with thick hair both on his head and covering his face like a beard. "Do you know me?" the old man asked as soon as Duarte entered the room. "No, sir," Duarte replied. "And there's no need for you to. What we're about to do removes any necessity for introductions. First, let me tell you that the theft of the slipper was nothing more than an excuse." "Oh, certainly," Duarte interrupted. "A simple excuse," the old man repeated calmly, "to bring you here to our house. The slipper was never stolen. It has never left its owner's hands. Giovanni Rufino, go get the slipper." The thin man left the room, and the old man continued speaking to Duarte. He explained that the famous slipper contained no diamonds and had not been bought from any Egyptian Jew. However, it was indeed Turkish, or so he had been told, and incredibly small, almost miraculous in size. Duarte listened carefully, gathering his strength, and finally asked firmly, "But sir, won't you just tell me plainly what you want from me, and why I am here in this house?" "You will find out," the old man answered calmly. At that moment, the door opened again, and the thin man returned, holding the slipper in his hand. Duarte was invited to come closer to the light so he could examine it. As he did, he saw clearly how tiny it was, truly extraordinary. The slipper was made of very fine Morocco leather. On the part that touched the foot, there was a soft padding lined with blue silk. Shining against that fabric were 2 golden embroidered letters. The old man chuckled softly, his eyes fixed on the slipper resting on the table. "A child's slipper, wouldn't you say?" he asked. "I suppose so," the young man replied, glancing at it briefly. "You suppose wrong," the old man said, shaking his head slowly. "That is not a child's slipper. It belongs to a young woman." "What does it matter to me?" the young man asked with a shrug. "It matters a great deal," the old man answered calmly. "Because you are going to marry the owner of that slipper." "Marry?" the young man, Duarte, exclaimed, his voice sharp with surprise. "Yes, indeed," the old man said without changing his expression. "Giovanni Rufino, go and bring the owner of the slipper." The thin man standing by the door nodded and left quickly. He returned just moments later, guiding a woman into the room. As she stepped forward, lifting the curtain at the entrance, she moved gracefully to the center of the room. She was not just a woman, she seemed like a vision, something out of a dream or a poet's imagination. She was beautiful in a way that made the world around her feel less real. Her hair was golden, falling loosely around her face, glowing softly like a halo. Her blue eyes were deep and distant, as if she were looking beyond the room, beyond the world, searching for something in the heavens. There was a quiet smile on her lips, gentle and full of peace, the kind of smile that seemed to belong more to angels than to people of this earth. She wore a simple white dress made of fine fabric that flowed around her modestly, outlining her figure just enough to suggest its grace, not enough to show too much. To any young man with a sense of style, even in such strange circumstances, she would have been breathtaking. Duarte, startled but trying to keep his composure, quickly straightened his dressing gown and adjusted his tie before giving her a formal bow. She responded with such kindness and grace that the frightening situation suddenly began to feel almost magical. "My dear doctor," the old man said, gesturing toward her, "this is your bride." The young woman lowered her eyes modestly. Duarte, still trying to understand what was happening, stammered that he had no desire to get married. "There are 3 things you will do right now," the old man continued, his tone cold and unshaken. "First, you will marry this woman. Second, you will write your will. And third, you will drink a certain potion from the East." "Poison," Duarte gasped, his face losing color. "People call it poison," the old man replied. "But I prefer to call it something else, a passport to heaven." Duarte felt cold all over. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Not even a sound escaped his throat. He would have collapsed to the floor if there hadn't been a chair nearby where he could fall into, his body trembling as he sat down hard. "Mr. Duarte," said the old man, "you have a small fortune of 150 contos. This pearl will be your universal heir." He paused, then turned to João Rufino. "João Rufino, go get the priest." João Rufino obeyed quickly. Moments later, the priest entered. It was the same bald priest who had blessed Mr. Duarte not long before. He walked straight to the young man and mumbled sleepily a passage from the book of Nehemiah, maybe another minor prophet. Then he took Duarte's hand and said, "Stand up." "No, I won't do it. I will not marry her." The old man stood up from his seat at the table and pointed a pistol at him. "What is this?" Duarte cried. "Is this murder?" "Yes," the old man replied coldly. "But the difference is in how you die, either violently by this gun or gently with poison. Choose!" Duarte was sweating and shaking all over. He tried to stand but couldn't. His knees knocked together in fear. The priest leaned close to his ear and whispered, "Do you want to escape?" "Oh yes," Duarte answered, not with his lips, for someone might hear, but with his eyes, which shone with the last spark of life left in him. "Look at that window," the priest whispered. "It's open. Below is a garden. Jump without fear." "Oh, Father," Duarte whispered back. "I am not a priest," the man whispered. "I'm a lieutenant in the army." "Say nothing." The window wasn't fully open, it was only slightly closed. Through the small crack, they could see a thin line of sky, already beginning to brighten. Without hesitation, Duarte gathered all his strength, jumped from his spot, and threw himself through the window, calling out to God for mercy. He didn't fall fair, only a short drop, and quickly got back on his feet. But waiting in the garden below was a fat man who tried to stop him. "What's going on?" the man asked, laughing. Duarte didn't answer. He clenched his fists and hit the man hard in the chest. Then he ran as fast as he could through the garden. The blow didn't knock the man down, but it gave him quite a shock. Once he recovered, he started chasing after Duarte. A wild race began. Duarte leaped over fences and walls, trampled flower beds, and bumped into trees that suddenly appeared in his path. Behind him the heavy man followed, panting and shouting, refusing to give up. Duarte ran fast, sweat pouring down his face. His chest heaved with every breath, and his strength slipped away bit by bit. One of his hands was cut, his shirt stained with the dew from the leaves. Twice, he nearly got caught. His robe had snagged on a thorny fence, pulling threads as he broke free. At last, exhausted, bruised and gasping for air, he collapsed onto the stone steps of a house hidden in the farthest garden. He looked behind him. No one. His pursuer hadn't followed this far. But they still might come. With great effort, Duarte stood again, climbed the final 4 steps, and entered the house. The door hung open, revealing a small, dimly lit room inside. A man sat there, reading an old copy of Jornal do Comércio. He didn't seem to notice Duarte enter. Duarte dropped into a chair and stared at the man. It was Major Lopo Alves. The Major, holding the paper now much smaller after many pages had been torn out, suddenly shouted without looking up. Major Lopo Alves said excitedly, waving the paper, "Angel of heaven, you are avenged. End of the final act." Duarte blinked, rubbed his eyes, and took a deep breath. He looked at the man, then at the table, then at the walls. Major Lopo Alves turned to him and asked, "So, what did you think?" Duarte replied, standing slowly, "Oh, excellent." The Major grinned and asked, "Strong passions, right?" Duarte nodded. "Very strong. What time is it?" The Major answered, "Just past 2 o'clock." They walked together to the door. Duarte breathed deeply again, checked himself for injuries, and moved toward the window. No one knows what went through his mind during those first few minutes. But after about 15 minutes, he finally thought to himself. Duarte whispered to himself, "Nymph, sweet friend, restless and wild dream, you saved me from a cruel joke with your strange nightmare. You replaced my boredom with terror, not a bad trade. A good deal and a serious lesson. Once more you prove that the best drama lives in the audience, not on the stage."
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.